Let me give you some background. My ex and I split up about 2 years ago. We have two kids together, our older son who's 10 and our younger son who's 7. The breakup wasn't great, but I thought we could at least be civil for the sake of our children. Right after we separated, my ex started trying to keep the kids away from me. She'd make excuses about why I couldn't see them on my scheduled days, claiming they were sick or had important events. It was clear what she was doing, trying to establish a pattern where I only saw the kids every other weekend so she could claim I wasn't an involved parent. I documented everything and took it to court. That didn't go well for her, and the judge established that I would have 35% custody timeshare. Fair enough, I thought. In March last year, we signed a stipulation agreement with this arrangement. Even though we make similar salaries, she actually makes a bit more than I do. I felt bad about the situation and offered to pay $100 above the state guideline for child support. I just wanted to make sure our kids were taken care of and thought this would help us move forward amicably. But that wasn't enough for her. My ex complained that the negotiations were taking too long and demanded more money. When I explained that we'd already agreed on an amount above the state guidelines and that I was trying to be fair, she insisted it wasn't enough, claiming she needed more for the kids. Then she just ghosted me, completely stopped responding to my texts and calls about finalizing our agreement. Next thing I know, she filed with the Department of Child Support Services, DCSS, using an old address she had for me. She was clearly trying to make sure I wouldn't get the paperwork in time to respond. What's worse, she told DCSS that I had 0% custody and that she had 0% income, which was completely false. They tried to push through an absurdly high child support amount based on these lies. Thankfully, I had mail forwarding set up from my old address, and I'd put my phone number into the DCSS website. When DCSS called me, I was able to file an answer within the deadline and stop them from defaulting me. But then it took 8 months to get a hearing. The whole time, if my ex had just accepted my original offer, she could have been receiving child support payments. Instead, she got nothing while waiting for the hearing, thinking she'd get a bigger payday. During those 8 months, something interesting happened. Due to some issues completely unrelated to child support, my ex actually lost some custody. Our arrangement changed to 50-50, equal time with both parents. When we finally got to the hearing, I was prepared. I'd kept meticulous records of everything. All court orders, proof that I was exercising my time with the kids, pictures, text messages confirming pickups and drop-offs, and a detailed custody calendar I've been maintaining. My ex walked into that courtroom like she owned the place. During the hearing, the judge asked both of us to state our positions regarding the custody arrangement. My ex claimed that I only had the children 22% of the time, referencing a court order from 2 years ago, and requested back pay based on this arrangement. When it was my turn, I explained to the judge that the order she mentioned was only in place for 2 months before it was modified. I pointed out that I had actually had the children 45% of the time during the period she was requesting back pay for, and now we had 50-50 custody. I told the judge I had all the documentation to prove this. I presented all my evidence, showing that she was lying about the timeshare. The judge carefully reviewed everything, including the proof that I was an involved parent who consistently spent time with our kids. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge announced his decision. He ordered 0 back pay and 0 child support going forward based on what I had presented. All that scheming, all those lies, and all she got was a year of no support payments when she could have been getting the extra amount I offered. She stormed out of the courtroom without saying a word to me. I'm incredibly relieved about the outcome, but the battle isn't completely over. My ex still refuses to pay her half of any unreimbursed medical expenses for our kids. But honestly, I've gotten used to covering those costs. I also provide all their school supplies, pay for their extracurricular activities, and buy most of their clothes. The kids aren't suffering. She still manages to buy our older son $200 Jordan sneakers and recently got him a $100 lizard to replace the one she somehow managed to kill through neglect. Money isn't the issue. It's just her entitled attitude that everything should go her way. At the end of the day, I'm just glad to have my kids in my life equally. No amount of money can replace that time with them, and watching my ex's entitled schemes fall apart was just the icing on the cake. So I went to visit my mom yesterday, and she told me this story that I just had to share. My little brother is 9 years old and loves hanging out with the other boys in our neighborhood. They're all between 8 and 12 years old. They spend most afternoons playing soccer or having bike races outside after finishing their homework. When they're indoors, they play Fortnite or FIFA 2022 online. Like most kids their age, they can get pretty loud when they're excited, but they're just being kids. The neighborhood my mom lives in has something similar to a homeowners association. They have a representative and everyone pays monthly fees, mostly for security and surveillance, even though the area is already very safe. The representative happens to be friends with my grandma, who also lives in the same neighborhood. Last Thursday, the representative called my mom with a complaint. Apparently, someone had reported that the kids were being too loud and that it was too late for them to be outside without supervision. The funny thing is, it was only around 7:30 in the evening. They didn't have school the next day, and the street is well lit with cameras on practically every light post. Not to mention, the neighborhood is basically gated all around. When the representative called, she told my mom about the noise complaint regarding the children and mentioned concerns about them being outside unsupervised so late. My mom responded that she was actually outside with the other parents supervising the children and suggested that whoever was complaining should talk to her directly. She also reminded the representative that they lived in a family-friendly neighborhood. The representative got defensive at this point. She told my mom that she wasn't trying to cause conflicts or make excuses and basically shut down the conversation. Later on, the representative was chatting with my grandma and mentioned that her nephew, who lives a few houses down from my mom, was having trouble working from home because there was too much noise outside. That's how my mom figured out who had made the complaint. Here's where it gets interesting. This guy had only recently graduated from college, and he regularly hosts parties from Thursday to Saturday. When he's not partying with friends, he blasts his stereo while drinking alone until 4 or 5 in the morning when he passes out drunk. Talk about being hypocritical. My mom decided to teach this guy a lesson. She gathered the boys and suggested they play right in front of his house, encouraging them to be as loud as they wanted. When my brother asked if they could really stay out until 10 p.m., my mom told them they could since there was no school the next day. The guy never complained about the kids again, but my mom didn't stop there. She started reporting him every time his speaker was on after midnight. Eventually, he got the message and stopped playing loud music except for the occasional party here and there. And that's how peace was finally restored to the neighborhood. The real issue wasn't the complaint itself, it was the fact that this same guy who blasts music 3 nights a week until 5 a.m., disturbing everyone's sleep and goes unpunished because he has family in the homeowners association, had the nerve to ask others to quiet down when people had asked him the same thing many times before. When they did, he would just turn his music up louder. I get that kids can be very rowdy, and my brother certainly is, but when he's asked to be more quiet, he listens, and so do his friends. I guess if a 9-year-old can be quiet when asked, and a grown adult can't, the problem isn't with the kids or their parents. My mom was definitely petty in how she handled it, but sometimes that's what it takes to deal with entitled people who think the rules only apply to others. She said that if he could blast music until 5 a.m., then the kids should be allowed to play until 10 p.m. The neighborhood has been much quieter since then. The guy still has the occasional party, but he keeps the volume reasonable, and the kids continue to play outside without any more complaints. My mom says she's just glad she stood up for the kids' right to play and have fun in their own neighborhood. This happened about 12 years ago when I worked as a customer assistant at a massive retail chain in the UK. I was a model employee, 3 years working there without a single sick day. If I had a cold, I'd just take medicine and power through my shift. That's how I was raised. You show up, you do your job. Everything changed during a weekend football match with my mates. Someone tackled me and I felt shooting pain in my knee. I knew something was wrong. I went to hospital that day. The doctor ordered an x-ray, but it showed no broken bones. The pain was unbearable, so they gave me painkillers and referred me for an MRI scan. The results showed I had a partial tear in my anterior cruciate ligament. I called my manager to let her know I was injured and wouldn't be able to come in. After a week at home, I went back to the doctor, who gave me a note signing me off work for another 3 weeks. I sent that in right away. About a month after the injury, I was going mad sitting at home. I could hobble around by then, so I decided to go back to work, even though I wasn't fully healed. My workmates kept me in the loop, and my manager was getting pressure from above about my absence. My first day back, I was told there would be a meeting about my absence. When the meeting started, I told them I had brought all my medical documentation, including hospital visit records, MRI results, and the doctor's note. The manager said she saw the documents, but company policy required a review of any absence that triggered their attendance policy thresholds. I went through the whole story again, the football match, the injury, and all my hospital visits, but she wasn't listening. She had this glazed look, just nodding while I spoke. My union representative barely said anything the entire meeting. The manager told me she needed to step out to review everything and make her decision. She came back 15 minutes later with a file. She told me that after reviewing my case, I'd reached the trigger point for absences, so she would be giving me a written warning. I asked how I could receive a written warning for a medical absence with proper documentation. The manager said it was company policy since I had triggered the attendance review threshold. I pointed out this was my first absence in 3 years. She said she understood, but her hands were tied by policy. I left that meeting feeling betrayed. 3 years of perfect attendance, and this is how they treat me. What made it worse was finding out later that my union representative was friends with my manager. That's when I decided if they wanted to play by the rules, I'd play by the rules too. I had 7 days to appeal the decision, so I spent that time reading through the company's attendance policy. I discovered that reaching the trigger point was supposed to initiate a review meeting, not automatically result in a written warning. For a first absence, employees were supposed to receive an informal, verbal warning, where the manager explains the attendance policy and documents the conversation. Only after that could things move to a written warning, but the real gold mine was a loophole. An employee could take 3 sick days every 3 months without triggering the attendance review mechanism. I prepared my appeal with all these points and submitted it. The written warning was overturned, but I didn't stop there. From that day forward, I took exactly 3 sick days every 3 months. That gave me an extra 12 days off per year, all within company policy. Later, my manager asked why I was taking all these sick days when I never did before. I said I was just following company policy and asked if taking 3 days every 3 months wasn't within the guidelines. The manager said this behavior seemed out of character for me. I said I had become more aware of company policies recently. They could have just accepted my one legitimate month-long absence and moved on. Instead, their attempt to punish me resulted in me taking 12 additional days off every year, all within their own rules. I wonder if they ever realized how their rigid enforcement of an unfair policy backfired. But mostly, I just enjoyed my extra days off, knowing I hadn't broken a single rule. So 2 weeks ago, I was admitted to the emergency room after having a stroke. It happened while I was eating dinner. Suddenly, my arm went numb and my words came out all jumbled. The doctors kept me under observation for almost 2 weeks, running tests and making sure I was stable before finally giving me the green light to go home last Friday. I was so ready to sleep in my own bed again after those uncomfortable hospital mattresses. When I was walking through the hospital lobby after being discharged, my unsteady legs betrayed me. I tripped on a rug and went down hard, landing on the floor and smashing my knee. The hospital staff rushed over, but it was just clumsiness. One nurse even joked that I was trying to extend my stay. Not funny at the time, but I can laugh about it now. I left with a walker because my injured knee wouldn't straighten and hurt whenever I put weight on it. The doctor gave me some pain medication and told me to ice it regularly, but movement was still difficult. The next day, my dad suggested we go to Walmart. He needed something for his car, a new air freshener and windshield wipers, and I wanted to pick up some multivitamins and nutritional shakes. My doctor recommended them to help with my recovery. We didn't need much, literally 5 items between the two of us. My dad carried his stuff while I tucked mine into the basket on my walker. It was my first outing since the hospital, and even though I was moving slowly, it felt good to be out. When we got to checkout, it wasn't busy. We picked a line where we were third in position. The store was surprisingly empty for a Saturday afternoon. The self-checkout lanes were empty, and even some regular lanes didn't have many people. The cashier next to our lane was closing up, getting ready for break after finishing with her last customer. She had her light off and was counting her drawer. That's when Old Fart showed up. Old Fart rolled up with his cart full of groceries and headed toward the cashier who was closing her lane. He had at least 30 items piled high: frozen dinners, cereal boxes, and what looked like half the produce section. She told him that she was finishing up with her last customer and going on break. Old Fart complained that the lines were too long everywhere, even though they weren't. He looked around before wheeling his cart behind me. Our cashier was chatting with her coworker, not paying attention to the customer waiting for their payment to process. They were talking about some TV show they both watched the night before. Old Fart sighed loudly and said something about them having a nice conversation. No one heard him. He tapped his foot impatiently and checked his watch several times in the span of a minute. Then he stepped beside me and asked if I would let him go ahead because he was in a rush. He didn't even acknowledge my walker or the fact that I was clearly recovering from something. I looked at his full cart and then at our 5 small items. I told him that we were also in a hurry, and since we didn't have many items, we wouldn't take long. I had a doctor's appointment later that afternoon for a follow-up, which is why we needed to be quick. His face tightened as he mumbled a cursed word and stepped back behind me. The cashier finished with the customer at the front, and now there was just one person ahead of us. They had about 10 items, mostly groceries. As we moved forward, I felt something slam into the back of my legs. Old Fart yelled at me to move and hurry up. He pushed his cart into me. Pain shot through my injured knee, and I yelped. It felt like someone had stuck a hot knife right into the joint. Everyone turned around. My dad spun around. The cashier looked up, and even the customer in front of us turned to see what was happening. The whole checkout area went quiet. My dad shouted at him, asking what his problem was. My dad doesn't usually get angry, but his face was serious now. The cashier warned Old Fart that if he couldn't calm down and wait without causing a disturbance, she would call security and have him escorted out. She already had her hand on the phone. Old Fart looked around, seeing all the eyes on him. He shoved his cart to the side and said, "We all took too long anyway." Some people in other lines were shaking their heads at him. He walked off without his cart, stomping toward the exit. My dad and I checked out quickly, and as we were heading toward the exit, we spotted Old Fart coming back for his cart, looking embarrassed as he got into a different and much longer line. Now he was last in a line with at least 5 people ahead of him, all with full carts. My dad and I shared a look and laughed. On the drive home, we stopped for ice cream, which made the whole thing better. My knee still hurt, but chocolate fudge sundaes fix a lot of problems.